Good morning, and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. This week, with the beginning of March Madness, we have been focusing on madness in the Bible. In other words, we have been looking at stories of people in the Bible who had or who feigned some type of mental illness. We have learned some significant things for our own faith, but I think it's important for us to note that the Bible didn't shrink from dealing with the reality of mental illness among us, and also that over and over, those with mental illness were treated with compassion and care. This week we have also seen ways that our society lives in madness, having abandoned the way of God far too many times. All this brought to mind the hymn, Christ Be Our Light. It's a hymn that invokes Christ to be the light in our all too dark world. If you've never paid attention to the words, however, you have missed a profound message of how much we need Christ as our light, and how distorted from God's way our lives have become. The verses begin describing our condition. Longing for light, we wait in darkness. Longing for truth, we turn to you. Longing for peace, our world is troubled. Longing for hope, many despair. Longing for food, many are hungry. Longing for water, many still thirst. Longing for shelter, many are homeless. Longing for warmth, many are cold. A world like that seems lost in madness. A world like that needs Christ to come, to be our light, to show us a better way. And as I considered all those many things our world longs for, I had to think of the Gadarene demoniac. Matthew, Mark, and Luke all record this exorcism by Jesus. Jesus and his followers had gone to the eastern shore of the Sea of Galilee, which was actually outside of Israel. In fact, the area was called the Decapolis, marked by 10 large, independent Greek-based cities. When they came ashore, they rather quickly encountered a demoniac. Mark vividly describes this suffering person. A man out of the tombs with an unclean spirit met him. He lived among the tombs, and no one could restrain him any more, even with a chain. For he had often been restrained with shackles and chains, but the chains he wrenched apart, and the shackles he broke in pieces. And no one had the strength to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and on the mountains, he was always howling and bruising himself with stones. Now, over and over this week, I have commented on how people with mental illness were treated with compassion, and I think this is a clear example of that. The story clearly states that people had often tried to restrain him, even using shackles. Now, we might not use shackles like this nowadays, but that was what they had in their day, and so that is what they did in order to help this man. He was wildly manic, lived in tombs, and was doing harm to himself. They were shackling him to protect him from himself, but nothing they could do was able to help him long term. Then Jesus arrived and learned that the man was possessed by many demons. In fact, the demons called themselves legion, for there were so many. Roman legions typically had 4,000 to 6,000 soldiers, so this man was powerfully overcome with what he faced. Jesus, like the townspeople, had compassion for him and cast the demons out. The demon begged that they not be sent to the abyss, and instead Jesus sent them into a herd of pigs nearby, and the pigs all rushed down the hillside and drowned themselves in the lake. Then, when all the townspeople heard about it, they came out to see, and they found the man who had been suffering with the demons clothed and in his right mind. The story ends in an odd way with people asking Jesus to leave that place. The man who had been healed wanted to go with Jesus, but Jesus sent him to tell the news of his healing to anyone who would listen instead. Now, there are a few things we should note there. First, why would the townspeople ask Jesus to leave? Well, they were clearly aware that in Jesus, God had come near them, and it's a pretty good guess that having God so near wasn't a comfortable thing for them. There are actually a few other instances in the Bible when similar things happen, and the people are afraid to have God so near to them because God might take notice of them and of their failings. They were much more comfortable thinking that God was remote and that God wouldn't notice them and take stock of the ways they didn't measure up. The other thing to note is how the man wanted to go with Jesus, but Jesus told him to go and tell. That seems odd because so many times in the gospel story, Jesus tells people not to tell. It's called the messianic secret, and most scholars seem to think that in Israel there were so many expectations for who and what the Messiah would be that people would place those expectations on Jesus if they thought of him as the Messiah. Jesus didn't come to be the Messiah in the way they expected. He wanted to be able to give the term the context and meaning he intended, not what they expected. That's just what he did on the cross. So why is it that this man can go and tell? Well, remember how I said a few minutes ago that Jesus and his followers were on the eastern shore of the Sea of Galilee in the region of the Decapolis? That means they weren't in Israel. And so all those expectations didn't apply. There, the news of Jesus could be told and spread far and wide. And maybe that's the lesson for today. If we are in our right minds, the thing to do is to tell the story of Jesus and God's love and grace. God has touched our lives and we are made whole. It's time to tell the story. Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.